Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to talk about how you can replace pots and save lots. Just a quick, some introductions. The people you're going to be hearing from today. My name's Peter McKiernan. I'm VP of Product Marketing here at Fusion Connect. We're also going to be talking with Megan Rojas, who's one of our strategic account managers, and she's going to talk about all the different Fusion Connect customers that she's worked on POTS replacement projects with. And then we're going to hear from Mitch Kaluchik, who is going to go through the more technical aspects of POTS replacement projects and how Fusion Connect approaches things, not just from the design perspective, but also from the implementation perspective. And then we'll also have some time at the end for discussion. But along the way, don't hesitate to ask questions. We want this to be interactive. So you should have a little QA button at the top of your screen, and feel free to ask questions. We have a whole bunch of people backstage here that will answer them, and or you can hold them to the end, totally up to you. But like I said, we want to keep this as interactive and make sure that you're getting the answers that you're looking for. So, some quick information on Fusion if you're not super familiar with us. We have been delivering full stack communications and telecom and cloud solutions for 30 years. And that's important, and I'm going to come back to that theme a little later in this presentation. We also have industry-leading guarantees and SLAs. We're the only company I've ever heard of with 100% uptime guarantee. But we also like to say that we are customer obsessed and made in the USA. And we do that because it's the best way we have found to serve our customers. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Late in 2023, we moved our tech support onshore. And as you can see from the left side of this graph, part of the reason we did that is it wasn't working very well. Customers weren't happy. So we moved things so that now when you call our tech support lines, you get someone that is in your time zone. And the results speak for themselves. Things have gone up exponentially. Now, we also know that when it comes to support, we're only as good as your last experience with us. And so this is not to say that we're resting on our laurels. We're constantly working at getting better and better and better at this. But being 100% based in the US has done a ton for our ability to make our customers happy. And we like that. So when we look at the big picture of Fusion Connect, there are 5 different areas where we tend to help customers. Customer contact centers, CCaaS, CSP licensing, specifically with Microsoft. We also help customers with their collaboration platforms like Teams and WebEx. We do managed network services, everything from broadband access to satellite to SD-WAN. But we also work with a lot of customers on how to modernize their calling infrastructure, specifically POTS. So I think everyone can agree that our world is incredibly connected today. And all of that has its roots way back in 1876 when the first phone patent was filed. And if you think about how much that changed, you could now have private conversations over long distances and in real time. And it's had a huge effect that we all have seen in our society every single day. But if you look back over those 148 years, there's a lot of milestones along the way. There's been change. There were the first touchstone phones introduced in the 60s. In 1991, caller ID was introduced. If you talk to some people who weren't around then, they might be surprised that it never existed. And in 1995, the first voice over IP software was released. And if you're familiar with VoIP, you know that that has come leaps and bounds and is now really the gold standard for business communications. And by 2007, now we have our 3G networks hitting saturation in the world. And today it's gone to 4G and 5G. And so these were big changes in the telecommunications industry and the technology that supports it. But then this last one, in 2019, the FCC Forbearance Order 19-72A1 was passed, and it's a little different, right? Like all these other milestones on this page are really about technical innovation. So why do I have an FCC forbearance order listed here? So let's take a look at what that order did. This order basically removed or relaxed many of the rules that the operators of POTS networks were bound by, including the rules that they used to set prices. And the justification for this was that they wanted to invest more money in their broadband and their wireless infrastructure and being able to bring those two things to the entire population of the United States. So what changed as a result? Well, specific to the topic of our webinar today, the operators of POTS network have shifted the focus away from their POTS and copper networks to wireless and fiber. It also means that the equipment that runs these POTS network is getting older. It means that the people that have the skills and the experience at fixing these networks are aging out of the workforce. And just getting the raw materials to build these networks is getting harder. For example, AT&T used to have a factory where they built telephone cables, the cables that run from pole to pole down your street. They've closed that factory. And so the overall investment in these networks is dropping. But the biggest impact has been prices are increasing dramatically for the end customer. So let's look at that. Now, the order was released in 2019. If you look at the 10 years before that, prices increased by 16.3%. Now, if you look at the 5 years after the order was released, you see that prices have nearly doubled and are increased by 31.4%. And that trend is only increasing. And we're seeing that in the customers that call us every day, but you also see it in data like this from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I want to hear from you. How has the price of your POTS lines changed over the last year? You should be getting a little pop-up where you can input and answer. So has it increased over 10%, over 5%? Has it stayed the same or decreased? Or you just don't know. That's fine too. So it's looking like we still have a couple stragglers coming in. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds and then I'm going to call it. Okay, so half of you have seen your bills increase by over 10%. And that aligns a lot with what we're seeing. There are also several of you that don't know. That's fine. But maybe it's a good time to check. Okay. Next thing I wanted to talk about is, so why are many of these POTS lines still around? If you look at the data from the FCC, most businesses have moved to a voice over IP system for their main telephony. They're using things like Teams, like what we're using today, to make their calling and their collaboration apps work. But there's still this 1% of edge cases that present really unique challenges. So there are roughly 16 million lines in use today, and many of them are used for applications that are a little bit different. things like elevator rescue phones, security alarms, fax machines, which are still mandatory in a lot of places, along with fire alarms, gate entries, and campus safety phones. And if you think about that, POTS replacement projects are really unique because it requires a knowledge of IT networking, it requires a knowledge of telephony, and it requires a knowledge of building and fire codes. And those three things are things that most IT departments have not worked with all of them at the same time. And so there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of questions out there that you find about what is the best way to do these things. So I want to introduce Megan Rojas. She's going to turn her camera on. Hi, Megan. Megan is a strategic account manager, and I'm going to start my first question. How many POTS projects do you think you've worked on?
Well, too many to count, but what I will say is that I've been with Fusion for 9 years, so nearly a decade, which is crazy. But when I first joined Fusion, there was still a fairly big push for pods. Customers were still very married to pods, wanting to continue with their pods lines. And then fast forward to even just a couple years ago, where pods replacement was coming up, maybe once or twice a month, into now where it is a part of every planning call that we have with a client. And if we're not already working on it, we are getting it into 2025 planning. And if we're not there yet, we're figuring out how can we do that, because customers are totally aware that now really is the time.
And so you talked about what motivates them. Is it just price?
No, I would say there's a few things that motivate them. Definitely price. I would say price is the biggest one, because the pricing is so unpredictable. A customer could enter the year with one rate, and then by the end of the year be 3x, or even 6 months in be 3x what they started the year at. So, and that is because of what you talked about in the previous slides, where the continued deregulation of the copper lines, carriers are just increasing the rates. They are really just unleashing. And so we have to pass those increases on, and customers are feeling it no matter where they are, the cost of the lines are increasing. But beyond that is also the support. So what a lot of clients don't realize is that copper pods are a best effort service. A lot of people think that because it goes back to the CO, so in the event that you have your power goes out, you're still going to have service. They have this idea that it is that there are SLAs, that it's guaranteed service, and it is absolutely not that way. Like I said, it's best effort. So in the event that you do have an issue, when that happens, how you're going to get a tech out there, when can you get a tech out there, that becomes very problematic. I've had customers where they're part of a natural disaster. I'd say it's a hurricane. We've had commits come back for 2 months. And then even when you get that commit, it gets pushed and pushed. And that's for a number of reasons. It's, the carriers, it's not their priority any longer. And the techs who know how to do this work are aging out. They're retiring from the workforce. So finding a tech that understands the technology is also problematic. So when you have a problem, it's very tricky to get resolution. And you mentioned that most of POTS lines that we see now really are being used for what they should be, which is emergency lines, elevator, but they're all critical lines that you do not want to have a failure on. You really can't afford to have a failure on. So when you're in that position, it's just very difficult. And then I would say lastly is the fear of abandonment. So with everything that's happening, with all the deregulation, I would say now really clients are afraid that there is going to be a mass decommission, which we aren't really seeing yet. We're mostly just seeing the pricing just continue to go up and up and up. There's nothing you can do to really get it back down. But and also further, they're not enhancing it. So when there is a failure, they're not going to replace the copper, of course. They may be able to repair it, but for all of those reasons, clients really are feeling it, and we're dealing with it every day.
So when you talk to customers, I've also heard that sometimes IT departments are just looking to consolidate.
Sure.
Mhm.
So a lot of what else that we are seeing is that in new construction areas, they're not putting in copper. So in those situations, you are going to a lot of times just have fiber. And so there's two things that happen with that. You're going to have a fragmented solution because you're going to have copper for everything else. And then if you're, as you continue to grow, move into a newer building or whatever the case may be, you're going to have only access to fiber. You're going to be forced to move to some sort of alternative to copper.
Mhm.
The other problem with that is that when they do that, normally they're going to bill you for the fiber line. So you're not going to get your POTS line rate that you're used to, which now I would say, most POTS lines rates are around $100 per line. You're going to be billed for a fiber circuit, which is most likely going to be around 700, 800, $1,000 per line, which of course is very problematic. And
Wow.
then you have this fragmented solution. So IT teams, it's very difficult to manage, and that's not appealing to anyone.
So in the past, when you and I have talked, you've shared a couple anecdotes with me about times when lines were down, and so could you share a couple of those situations and maybe some good things and some bad things that have happened?
Mhm. So I would say the good thing is that when that happens, almost always the client walks away saying, "Okay, let's get away from this. Let's get onto an alternative." They get it because getting the POTS lines repaired is so difficult. I'm like I said, the one that comes to mind is natural disasters, which we've all seen that happen a lot lately. But with hurricanes, even most recently, where you can't get anybody out there for several months, and
Yeah.
then we've had situations where they come back and say, "Well, we're just not." And they can do that, so
Mhm.
then you really run into a problem. And at the end of the day, you're forced to make a change away from the copper anyway. So
Mhm. And when you talk to customers about starting migration, what's the first step?
the first step is getting with myself and someone like Mitch, who we'll talk to in a minute here, who is a senior cloud solutions architect at Fusion. And we kind of get together and scope out what do you currently have, look at the inventory. What are your lines being used for? Do you know what they're being used for? Do you need to, um, have some additional resources like a company like with a company like Fusion to order, tag, and locate to see, where they are? Do you know where they are? And then after that, we can kind of develop a solution that works for you. We have multiple different alternatives at Fusion. So we
Mhm.
have like your traditional POTS in a box that you'll hear a lot solution. And we also have other alternatives in the event that you don't need the LTE or the battery backup. So
Awesome. Well, thanks, Megan. This has been great.
thank you.
I am going to start another poll. I'm going to ask you to tell us how many POTS lines does your business have today? Just total, not per location, but just in total. Is it less than 10? Is it between 10 and 20, 21 and 40, or more than 40? Oh, let's see here. Looks like it is. Oh, 10 to 20 was ahead, but now it's about 50-50. Oh, nope, it's jumped ahead again. So I'm going to call it at 50% 10 to 20 and 17% over 40. That's amazing. I can imagine if you have over 40 lines and each one is costing you over $100, that adds up. I'm not going to try to do the math, but you know, it's it points out to the fact that um, migrating your POTS lines in 2025 is an easy way to save a lot of money. But I am now going to introduce and hand things off to Mitch Kablushik, our Senior Cloud Solutions Architect. And I'm still going to be clicking the slides, but take it away, Mitch.
Thank you, Peter. My name is Mitch Kablusik, Senior Cloud Solutions Architect here at Fusion. Been here just about 16 years now, and I've worked on all sides of this. I used to install POTS signs, connect them at the site, replace cards in data centers. I've done all sorts of work here. And so today I wanted to talk about the options for POTS replacement. We find most companies, like Peter said earlier in the presentation, they've already looked at alternatives for their voice solution. So we don't see too many customers or clients using POTS lines for voice services, but they are still out there, especially the smaller mom and pop shops out there. But most people are using them for fire life safety lines, elevators, fire alarms, alarm panels, bat phones, as I like to call them. Those red phones, a lot of hospitals have them. They need an emergency phone that people can pick up. But there's also other ancillary analog devices that are being used: fax machines, postage machines, credit card terminals. And so when you're looking at replacing these, obviously POTS is a very copper-based analog service. When we're looking to replace them, we're looking to move them to a more digital solution, leveraging internet of some sort to provide that same analog handoff, just over a different medium. So Peter, if you hit the next one, next slide. So for regular analog devices that don't require any sort of compliancy standards, fax machines, credit card terminals, postage machines, even ATM machines, they don't require any NFPA 72 compliance. Our solution is to deploy our SIP service with an ATA adapter on site. This is going to leverage an existing connection on site, as well as a modem router on site. We can assign, we can hook the circuit directly up to our device or put this behind your equipment, but this is going to give you that analog signal for that device, non-NFPA 72 compliant device, and come at a much better rate for you over using a very expensive POTS line. Now, a lot of POTS lines out there are used for fax lines. You can go this route. You can hook up an ATA. They work well, but a lot of people are moving to digital faxing, e-faxing. We offer our Fusion fax service to replace that line. We can port the number over. It's a browser-based service. You log in, you can create as many users as you want, and you send and receive from your browser. You can also send and receive via email. So you'll have a specific email address you can send to. You put in the number you want to send to, the attachment you want to send. It goes off to our eFax service, and away it goes. So all of these are great alternatives to using POTS lines for these regular analog devices. But we all know that the majority of POTS lines are used for NFPA 72 compliant devices, or I should say equipment that requires compliancy standards. So Peter, will you hop to the next slide for me?
Yep.
So in the event that we have these lines for alarm panels, fire panels, elevators, those bat phones, red phones I was talking about, we offer a solution, 8-line solution. It's an all-in-one solution, built-in battery backup, 24-hour battery backup, so it meets the compliancy standards. The primary connection is generally the customer's internet connection on site. We can provide connections as well if there isn't one available. Maybe you have a warehouse that doesn't have a connection, we could look at supplying one. And then there is the built-in cellular failover. It's a 5G device. We supply the cellular connectivity to it. So not only do you have redundancy on the internet side with a primary connection and a cellular connection, but you also have that battery, built-in battery backup for the power redundancy. So there is, and this is the sort of a secret, there is a second cellular modem built into the device. So we could add a second cellular SIM as well. So sort of a triple redundancy, if you will, on the WAN connectivity. But the neat thing about this box is it supports virtually every type of line, right? Alarm panels, fire panels. It is, it does support faxing as well, and it can support voice lines. So there are no voice services necessarily on it, voicemail, hunt groups, but in the event that you have a bat phone, red phone, you can have a straight analog line off of this. It'll have all the same capabilities as these NFPA 72 compliant lines, but for those red phones and bat phones. So really you get everything out of this box, regardless of what you're connecting it to. And in the event that you have more than 8 lines, we can stack these boxes on site. Maybe you have 12, 24. I've seen large amounts of lines. This is probably the best solution out there for it, made by one of the best POTS replacement box manufacturers. So want to hit the next one for me? I noticed we're coming up on the time, and I planned on, I had stuff written out, but I'm going to kind of speed through this. So we wanted to paint a picture of before and after. A POTS replacement strategy is in place. So this is the before picture. You'll notice at the top you have your copper legacy POTS analog lines going to your site. Generally the PBX, the alarm panels, fire panels, fax machines, all those analog devices are separate from the network. And then down below, you'd have your internet connection going to your data network and your firewall. That's the before. Pete, if you want to hit the after. The after is now you're moving your POTS lines to a digital solution, and we can leverage that existing broadband that you have going into your router and your data side of your network as the primary WAN for our box. We layer in the cellular failover to that, and now you've gone from an analog and digital site to a fully digital site while still being compliant with the federal guidelines. So to make that a little short. Thank you. And so our process is a little different. We don't just talk to you, send a box out, make it transactional. We actually come in, Megan touched on this. We do an assessment. We talk to you, we find out what you're using your lines for, and then we plan accordingly. Maybe we do our SIP with the ATA for the lines that don't require compliancy standards. And then we do our other 8-line battery backup box for your other devices. Maybe we move you to more, an eFax for all those fax lines. But either way, we come in, we do an assessment. Step 2, we actually create that solution, get it on paperwork, send it out to you, walk through it with you on the phone. And step 3, something that's unique about us, we do an initial site survey before we deploy anything. We want to get a tech on site, see where everything's located, know where we're going to place the equipment, know where your extensions that run out to all of these devices are. So we know that when we come back for the activation, we're going to do it right. We're going to have everything in order. We take pictures, we document it, and create a plan to actually install our equipment and activate it. So, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mitch. Really appreciate it. We're just about out of time, but we'll stay a little bit long to answer any questions. But if you do have a hard stop, I wanted to provide you with a couple places you can go to share a lot of this same information with others. There's an ebook online here, and we also have a great blog post that goes through the information. And then we will also be following up with an email that includes a link to a recorded version of this. So it'll be available for posterity. And I just wanted to also say thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. No matter who you choose to work with on your POTS replacement project, we wish you the best of luck.